Isn't it a great day to be a Christian? If you have your Bible, turn to the book of Joshua. Joshua chapter 5. The Bible tells us that God is for us. But in the passage that we're about to read from Joshua 5, Joshua asked the Lord, whose side are you on? And he didn't get the answer he was looking for. So let's read about Joshua, the Battle of Jericho, starting in Joshua chapter 5, verse 13. And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth, and did worship, and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so. Keep reading in chapter 6. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, and none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given unto thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets. And it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up every man straight before him. And Joshua the son of Nun called the priests, and said unto them, Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said unto the people, Pass on, and compass the city, and let him that is armed pass on before the ark of the Lord. And it came to pass, when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests, bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns, passed on before the Lord, and blew with the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. And the armed men went before the priests that blew with the trumpets, and the rearward came after the ark, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth, until the day I bid you shout. Then shall ye shout. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about it once. And they came to the camp and lodged in the camp. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. And the 7 priests, bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord, went on continually, and blew with the trumpets. And the armed men went before them, but the rearward came up after the ark of the Lord, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And the 2nd day they compassed the city once, and returned into the camp. So they did 6 days. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day, and compassed the city after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. And it came to pass that the 7th time, when the priests blew with the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, Shout, for the Lord hath given you the city. And the city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein, to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And ye in any wise keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourselves accursed, when ye take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel a curse, and trouble it. But all the silver and gold and vessels of brass and iron are consecrated unto the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted when the priests blew with the trumpets. And it came to pass, when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. The title of the lessons today have been what we call children's songs. This morning we did Jesus Loves Me. Tonight we're singing I'm in the Lord's Army. We're not singing it because when I sing that I have to do the motions, and I don't want to be up here flying over the enemy or any of those things. The name of that song is I'm in the Lord's Army, but anytime a little kid asks you to sing it, they'll say, sing, I'm in the Lord's Army, because that's the way you sing the song. But some people don't like to sing songs about fighting. They don't like songs about the military. In fact, back in 1986, the Methodist Church decided they would take out all the songs from their hymnals that had anything to do with the military. So they deleted Onward Christian Soldiers and the Battle Hymn of the Republic and anything that talked about war. They took it out. Now, it turned out that so many people got upset that the later edition of their hymnal, they had to put them back in, but apparently there was still a lot of controversy. In 2015, the Seventh-day Adventists deleted Onward Christian Soldiers from their hymnal. Now, I'm not sure if I'm in the Lord's Army is in anybody's songbook. I don't think I've ever seen it in print before, at least not in a hymnal, but I'm sure it wouldn't have made the cut if somebody was cutting out songs about warfare, because that's talking about warfare. It's talking about fighting for the Lord. Now, the people that don't like those songs argue that the God of war was in the Old Testament. God was fighting and destroying and killing people in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, he wasn't like that. In the New Testament, God is love and God is peace. And if we want to be loving and peaceful, then we shouldn't sing about war. But if you look at the New Testament closely, that's not the case. Let's look at some passages in the New Testament that talk about military terms. Look at 2 Timothy chapter 4. 2 Timothy chapter 4, Paul's writing to Timothy and he says, I have fought a good fight. Fighting, that's kind of like the military does, isn't it? 2 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul wrote this starting in verse 7. He said he was approved as a servant of God by the word of truth, by the power of God, by the armor of righteousness on the right side and on the left. Well, power and armor, those are kind of military terms, aren't they? He wrote more. Look at 2 Timothy chapter 2. Paul's giving advice to Timothy. What does he tell him? Look at 2 Timothy 2, verse 2. I'm sorry, let's look at verse 3. Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No man that warreth entangle himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who hath chosen him to be a soldier. In other words, Paul's telling Timothy, you're in the Lord's army. If you're going to please your commanding officer, you need to keep your mind on the battle. You don't need to be thinking about things of the world. You need to be focused on the battle at hand. Perhaps the most well-known passage that contains all of the military terms is in Ephesians chapter 6. Look at Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus, chapter 6, starting in verse 13. He tells them, wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, above all taking the shield of faith, wherewith you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. See, the New Testament unapologetically uses military terms talking about the Christian walk. As Christians, we're literally supposed to be serving in the Lord's army. Tonight's text, we read a story that practically every child that's ever gone to church camp or been in a Sunday school class has sung. I'm in the Lord's army. I may never march in the infantry, ride with the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never fly o'er the enemy, but I'm in the Lord's army. What you may not know is that song is most likely based on the passage that we read. In fact, there's another song, an old spiritual. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls came a-tumbling down. That's the story that we read about tonight. Here's the setting. Israel got out of Egypt. They went straight to the borders of the Promised Land. They sent spies into the Promised Land. Joshua and Caleb were the only two that came back with good stories. The other 10 spies came back and said, there are giants living here. And they've got walled cities, and they've got great armies, and we'll get crushed if we go in there. And so for the last 40 years, they've been wandering in the wilderness, waiting for all those people to die. And now Joshua and Caleb are the only men that were above 20 years old when they left Egypt that are still alive. In fact, at this point, even Moses has died, and God's going to let Joshua lead the people into the promised land. So the priests pick up the Ark of the Covenant. They start leading the people. When their feet touch the Jordan River, the water just stops flowing. And they all walk across on dry land, much like they did when they were leaving Egypt and crossed the Red Sea. And now they're camped in the promised land. They're in the very shadows of the city of Jericho. But it's a very impressive city. And there's a problem. Israel has come to take Canaan land, but the Canaanites didn't want to give it to them. They were going to fight for their land, and they weren't going to hand it over freely. And remember, they're giants in the land and walled cities. And Jericho may have been the most walled city of them all. It was a powerful, well-armed city, and the Israelites had to conquer it. So Joshua goes off, apparently by himself, to pray. Maybe he's going to seek guidance. And in verse 13 of our text, we read, "And it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand." Now, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole and lose our train of thought. I believe that this man that Joshua met was Jesus. There are 4 reasons that I think that. First of all, the captain of the Lord's host said the very same words that God had spoken to Moses out of the burning bush. "Take off your shoes. You're walking on holy land." This man, the captain of the guard, allowed himself to be worshipped. Remember, Joshua fell down and worshipped him, and the Bible says that nobody, no heavenly being other than God, allows you to be worshipped. Remember in Revelation when John fell down to worship the angel, and the angel forbade him to do that? Only God can be worshipped. A few verses later, in chapter 6, verse 2, he's identified as the Lord. It said the Lord spoke to Joshua. And John 1:18 says that the only way that we can see God is in the person of Jesus Christ. It says, "No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has declared him." So if this man that Joshua was talking to was from God, it wasn't an angel, it wasn't God himself, so that makes it Jesus now. So I think that Jesus was the commander of the Lord's army. Let's get back to the story. Apparently there's something so unsettling about seeing this man with his sword drawn that Joshua falls down on his face, and in chapter 5, verse 14, he says, "What saith my Lord unto his servant?" What was the message? What did this man want Joshua to know? Well, in the next chapter, we learn what the message was. That it was time. That they were going to go in, they were going to take Canaan land, that he was going to lead them, that the Lord's army was prepared and they're ready for battle, that they wouldn't be going into this conflict alone. Look at Joshua 6, verse 2. It says, "And the Lord said to Joshua, See, I've given into thine hand Jericho and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor." One of the most encouraging passages in all the Bible is in the New Testament book of Romans. Romans 8, starting in verse 31, says, "What shall we then say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? He that spared not his own Son, but delivered him up for us, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things?" We can be confident that God is with us. That's the message that God's trying to give Joshua. I'm going to battle. You don't have to take this land all by yourselves. And it's to drive the fact home, the Lord told him the battle plan. He said, here's how you're going to do it, and it wasn't a battle plan that any other army besides the army of God could pull off. He said, here's what you're going to do. You're going to get 7 priests with horns, and they're going to go around in front of the Ark of the Covenant, and you're going to put all your fighting men in front of them, and you're going to march around the city once. And you're going to do that every day for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, you're all going to march around the city 7 times, and then the priests are all going to blow their horns, and everybody's going to shout, and the walls are going to fall down. Well, that's a great plan if it really happens, but most armies wouldn't come up with that plan. But that's happened. And after Israel took Jericho, they burned it to the ground. They didn't leave anything. No spoils were to be taken. Everything was to be utterly destroyed. The last few decades, archaeologists have found the ruins of the ancient city of Jericho. And they discovered some things. First of all, they discovered that the walls didn't get knocked down. That the walls didn't get pushed in like they would have if an invading army had conquered it. They just kind of caved in on themselves. The people that don't believe said there must have been a big earthquake because they just kind of fell. The walls fell on itself. They weren't attacked by any force. Secondly, they found a thick layer of soot on everything inside the city. Because, as we know from the Bible, the city was burned. Everything was destroyed. And thirdly, the city didn't fall like most cities because they'd usually have a siege. They would line up around the city. They wouldn't let anybody come in. They wouldn't let anybody go out for weeks or maybe months until they starved all the people out. But when they went through the rubble of the walls of Jericho, they found bushels and bushels of grain. They had food. There were still provisions inside the city. It had been quick. By God's command, Jericho was never to be rebuilt. And there's another city that was built nearby. It was also called Jericho. But old Jericho is still right where it was when God knocked it down. Why? Well, to me it's pretty obvious. God wanted the city of Jericho to stand as an example to everybody of what would happen if you're on the Lord's side. It wasn't just a witness to the nation of Israel. It's an example for us. One of the verses that we use quite often when we're studying the Old Testament is Romans 15:4. Romans 15:4 says, whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we, through patience and comfort of the Scriptures, might have hope. God made the story of the Battle of Jericho famous because He wanted us to realize that we need to be in His army. We need to be on His side because God's going to do what He said He's going to do. Now, that's what Joshua was hoping that the stranger was going to say when he said, whose side are you on? Look at Joshua 5:13 again. And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with a sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and saith unto him, art thou for us or for our adversaries? In other words, Joshua says, whose side are you on? Are you for us or are you against us? I read about a man that was in Washington, D.C. He had business at the Pentagon, but he couldn't find the Pentagon. And if you've ever been to Washington, you know that there's this road around Washington called the Beltway. And it goes around the city. And sometimes people get caught up on that Beltway and they go around and around and around. That's what happened to this man. And he kept crossing the Potomac River. And he crossed it, and then he crossed it going the other way, and he got so confused, he was totally lost, and he saw somebody at the bus stop. So he pulled up, rolled down his window, and said, excuse me, could you tell me which side the Pentagon's on? And the man scratched his head for a minute, and he says, well, I think they're on our side. You listen to the news these days, you kind of wonder which side the Pentagon's on. But that's what Joshua was asking. He's saying, which side are you on? Are you for us or for our adversaries? And then the answer came in verse 14, and he said, nay, but as the host of the Lord, as captain of the host of the Lord, am I now come. Joshua said, are you on our side or their side? And Jesus said, no. I'm the captain of the Lord's army. I'm the captain of the host of the Lord. Well, that can't be right. I mean, I thought that God was supposed to be on our side. God had commanded Joshua and the people to go up to Israel. He told them to take all the cities. And now he comes up and the commander of the host of the Lord says, I'm not going to be on either side. I'm not on your side. What's going on here? You may remember, we've talked about this before, that during the Civil War, somebody came up to President Lincoln and asked him if God was on the side of the North in the war. And Lincoln responded this way: "We know that the Lord is always on the side of right. My constant anxiety and prayer is that I and the nation should choose to be on the Lord's side." In the military, do privates get to tell the generals how to run the army? No. They're in the general's army. They do what the general says. The generals set the agendas. They pick the course of the battle. They choose how things are going to run. And every man and woman that serves in the military serves under the generals. This wasn't Joshua's army. Joshua wasn't going to take Jericho. The Lord's army was going to take Jericho. Joshua had to decide if he was going to be on the Lord's side. We're in the Lord's army. It's his, not ours. We're in the Lord's church. It's his. It's not ours. He's in charge. We aren't. He gets to set the agenda. He gets to make the rules. It's our job to choose to be on God's side. Well, how do I make sure that I'm on God's side? Well, first of all, we need to fully trust in God's power. If God was there for Joshua, he'll be there for us. He'll be there for you. One of the major reasons that armies fail in battle is they panic and they lose trust in the decisions of their commanders. We need to realize that sometimes there are going to be problems. There are going to be situations that we can't control, but God can. Jesus told us that we're going to have problems. Look at John chapter 16. John 16, verse 33, Jesus said, "In the world you have tribulation." We're going to have problems. We're going to have things we don't understand. We're going to have bad situations. Jesus told us that, but the verse didn't end there. He went on to say, "But take courage, I have overcome the world." It's in those times of tribulation. It's in those times of trials. It's when things are not going our way. We need to remember that God's got this. He's in charge. We've just got to make sure that we're on his side. So first of all, if I'm going to be a soldier for Christ, I need to trust him. Second thing, I've got to remember who's in charge. God gets to call the shots, not me, not you, not any group of men and women on earth. God leads the way if we're going to have victory in Jesus. And number three, we need to realize the significance of standing on holy ground. God told Joshua in chapter 5, verse 15, "Loose the shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy." It wasn't enough for God just to tell him. He said, "Take off your shoe." He gave Joshua an object lesson. Tonight we're standing on holy ground, not because we're in a church building, but because we're the church. The Bible says where two or three are gathered together in his name, that the Lord is with us. When God's present, we need to make sure to realize that we're on holy ground. God didn't want him to track in the dirt of the world into this special place, so he told him to take his shoes off. Our commander, Jesus Christ, is calling for total commitment. When we come together as a church, we don't need to bring the dirt of the world in here with us. We don't need to bring gossip and slander and all the other things that are out there in the world when we come together, when we assemble with our brothers and sisters. Why do we need to make that kind of commitment? Because an army is only as strong as its weakest link. If the whole army were as involved in the battle as I am, how strong would the army be? What if the whole army of God only gave God as much time as I do? How strong would it be? What if all army of God only gave financially to God as much as I do? Would we be able to keep the doors open? If I'm going to serve in the Lord's army, I need to remember that he makes the rules, he sets the terms, and I've got to do it his way. This is holy ground. This is serious business. Joshua understood that. Later on in the book of Joshua, in Joshua chapter 24, verse 15, we read this. "Choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Joshua was determined that he and his family were going to be part of the Lord's army. Look at Luke chapter 9, verse 23. Jesus said, "If any man come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Are we following Jesus? Are we part of the Lord's army? The mark of a good soldier is the willingness to give all for their cause. If you're not in the Lord's army tonight, in order to enlist, you need to be a Christian. It's the only life worth living, the only death one would dare to die. Maybe you are a Christian. You haven't been serving the way you need to serve. There are things you could do better. There are things that you could do that are being left undone. Maybe it's public things that you need to make a confession of tonight in front of everybody. Maybe it's something that you want us to pray with you about. Maybe you just need to pray to yourself tonight. Pray for yourself tonight to God to make things right. If there's anything that's wrong in your life that you'd like to make right tonight, you can do it right now. We stand together as we sing.